Something is returning to the garage today, one of the cars that got away. Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel where people always ask about the former Shmeemobiles. Are there any I regret selling? Are there any that might return back to the collection? Well, today we're going to be welcoming a car back here. I say back here, actually for the first time here at the Shmuseum, one of the cars that featured pretty heavily on the channel. There have been lots of videos, a car that has many memories with it, but at the time, needs must, it had to go for some other cars to arrive. So I can't personally wait for this, a car returning to the garage. On the topic of cars coming back, there are two cars here that we could kind of say that's happened with. The Clio. Now, I do technically own my first ever car. Admittedly, that was pre-Shmee 150, but my 1.2 litre Clio Dynamique, which looks exactly the same as this, or did look exactly the same as this, because it is now a cube of metal as it was written off a few years ago when we tracked it down and bought it from the scrapyard. I had owned it about 15 years prior. Wish it could have been in its original state, but I bought the identical, same spec car here, even wearing the same plate that I used to have back on mine when I was a teenager. Now, I also bought back the one that did get away, the original OG Shmeemobile, my Aston Martin V8 Vantage Roadster. That was the first time I ever presented a video on the Shmee 150 channel, was driving in that car.
Hi, I'm Tim, or Shmee 150 as you know me on YouTube. Today we're driving around London in my Aston Martin V8 Vantage Roadster.
I had sold it about a decade before. I had it from 2010 to 2012, but a couple of years ago, tracked it down, went out for a test drive. The then owner saw how much it meant to me, allowed me to buy it back, and even in the little pouch between the knees in the driver's seat, it actually still had a letter in it from my mum from back then, still in the car, very personal. That will never ever be sold again, but there are some others. There are some other cars which I know you guys have loved over the years that I've said farewell to, so let's dive in to some of the top choices. A few times I've liked a car so much that I've gone on to buy its direct replacement or even another of the same. My first Ferrari was the FF, but then I had a GTC 4 Lusso. When I sold that car, I then bought another GTC 4 Lusso after I realized how much I missed it before, of course, now having the Purosangue, which is the successor. So those four Ferraris, which are in many ways the same kind of car, 4-seat, V12, comfortable, practical, super GT Ferraris, because I just enjoyed them so much. So I'm not putting the first Lusso on the list because I had a second Lusso and now have the Purosangue, but that's the kind of thing that I think tells you when you genuinely love a car, because you go on to literally get the next one of basically the same, just like I did with, if we come over here, the AMG GTs. My original AMG GTR became the AMG GTR Pro, became the AMG GTR Roadster, and then became the AMG GT Black Series. No secret that I quite like the AMG GT platform, given I've had four of what you could say again are basically the same car, even more closely linked when it comes to these, because yes, okay, big changes in terms of engine and aerodynamics and upgrades with the facelift that came along, but basically keeping true to the car that I really, really like. So again, I can't really put the earlier ones on the list because that's the ultimate. Excluding the car we're about to see, in no particular order, three former Shmeemobiles that I know you guys would love to see again. The first of them links to this, my 675 LT Spider, but previous 675 LT Coupe. That was one of the most iconic Shmeemobiles of all time. MSO Cerulean Blue. I got to see the car at the McLaren Production Centre at the MTC when it was going through final assembly, took delivery of it, took it on some amazing journeys. The Blue Crew that we had at the time with the LT, the FF, and my 981 Porsche Cayman GT4. So many fun things. I did about 5,000 miles in that car, sold it to a lovely second owner who had it for quite a few years after me. When he then sold it via Bramley, I actually went out, saw the car again, thought about it definitely, but literally having two of the same car in the collection of a slightly older car, I couldn't really make any sense of. And the 675 LT Spider, which was technically never supposed to exist, when the 675 LT came out, McLaren literally said available in coupe form only. It was never going to be a Spider, a bit like the GT3 RS, and then that launched. It does make sense for a carbon fiber tub, but with the option to upgrade from the coupe to the Spider, obviously decided to do that, went with this stunning shade of Orion purple. Absolutely no regrets to this day, but that is certainly, if I can say so myself, one of the best spec'd cars that I've ever owned, hence why I did the tribute to it with the Senna. Upstairs then, here in the office, is where I have all of the 1 to 18 scale models. Many of the former Shmeemobiles, the idea is to have all of them. Now, there are some that have never been released, like the Vantage GT8. There are some that are on pre-order or are basically impossible to get in this exact scale. Now, many of them have been painted. There are some that are still yet to be painted, I'm aware, like the Senna, for example, but both of the next two cars I want to mention are actually here. Now, I also recently received, if I just show you very quickly here, the AMG GT Black Series in Solar Beam Yellow, in my exact configuration. It's still got the stickers on to hold things closed, but this is literally, if you notice the boot lid, my exact spec. None of the GT Black Series left the factory with the yellow boot lid. They all had a black boot lid, so they have literally made that one with no contact in the exact same spec of my one of one in the world, which is pretty cool. Anyway, we'll pop that in the cabinet because I want to move on to the first or the second of the three cars I'm going to mention right now, and that is in here. Check this out. The Shmini, as we called it. My classic Rover Mini. I had a 2001, one of the very last of the old original Minis. Tiny little thing in British Racing Green with the silver stripes, silver roof, the plate that then went on to the Vantage Roadster again as well. But I actually really missed that. There was something fun about driving around in the quirky charm of an old Mini, which was the model that survived for the longest in its same form, that had so many different fun stories to tell. And I am sure at some point down the line, there's going to be another one of these joining the garage, because after I picked it up, yes, it had some troubles. Yes, it had a few little niggles and issues and was a bit of a pain. And even when I wanted to take it over to Germany to go and drive it on the Nürburgring because I was that crazy, that morning the car decided to have a bit of a fluid leak and we had some petrol all over the garage floor and it didn't actually end up going anywhere. But one day, I think that would be a fun journey. So I'm going to pop this back in here because the third, or second from here at least, that I'm going to talk about is a car that I know there is a lot of love for from many of you guys. When it left the garage, there were all sorts of, how could I possibly sell that, given what I used it for and given what the plans or usage of it is. And there's definitely a plan for something that will follow up from it in the not too distant future, and that is back on the right hand side. It is the AMG G63, the Shmeemobile G Wagon that we did with topaz skin in cerulean blue with the navy blue bumpers to match the McLaren Senna, the same spec as the Senna. And when we were towing the Senna behind the G Wagon, it was seriously cool. We made these with mini shunts, hence why it's got the exact same plate, the SH63 MEE plate, which I have on reserve for another G Wagon. And I don't think it's going to be too long until we have some news on that front. There'll be an update, there'll be a facelift, there'll be something new, so stay tuned for that. But I definitely missed the G Wagon. I had it for about 3 years, drove in the region of 17,000 miles or so with the car. It actually came up for sale again recently. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I would buy the exact same one back, because as much as I loved the Opus upgrades and the Akrapovic exhaust and everything, that was a car that I bought and sold, right? A fairly normal version of the G, the original latest generation G, as opposed to something really unique or special, but I would like a follow-up to it. So we've had the LT Coupe, we've had the Shmini, and we've had the G63, but the car that is waiting outside to come on in is a car which had a lot of personal touch to it. So let's head back downside, open up the shutter, and welcome it in. I can hear something, and I can see something too. Coming on in is a former Shmeemobile that it is amazing to see back here as it arrives at the Shmuseum. Maybe you can tell from the noise, maybe not quite yet, but welcome back, or for the first time I should say, here to the Shmuseum, the Focus RS Red Edition. This is the full project. We did a lot with this car, with Mountune, with some amazing partners. It's actually had some more modifications since, including a new exhaust, which sounds amazing. We're gonna go through this. I'm gonna take it out for a drive as well to be reminded what this little beast was all about. We're going to get into what's changed with the car, And talk about what makes this, like I say, the one that kind of got away in many respects. But this was actually the 22nd car that I owned. I've been looking it up on the list that I've got, out of what is now about 55 cars. It's crazy to think what's come and gone since, because I bought the red edition back in spring 2018. I owned it until the end of 2020. So I had this car for about 2.5 years. In that time, I drove it around 9,500 miles, but we did loads of upgrades. The carbon fiber bonnet, the wheels, the interior. It looks amazing. And honestly, as I am currently basically driving the Heritage RS an awful lot, as I said recently, to see this again and to be reminded of all of the changes and things that we did to it have certainly made me, in a way, want to do them to the Heritage. And that was such a big discussion back at the time. If you were following back then, obviously, gosh, I sold this over 3 years ago now. You might remember the split decision that I had between, do I keep the red edition, one of 300, or do I keep the Heritage, one of 50? Effectively, two of the last special editions ever of the Focus RS. It ended at the Mark III. Now, some obvious changes include the tail lights, but there's more that's going on underneath the skin as well. And before we get the car out, I do want to just point a little bit more closely at the car, at some of the changes, at some of the modifications, what's different to now, and then explain a little bit more about it. It is really fun that this car is here, because you have to remember, I sold this Focus RS before I had the keys to the Shmuseum. It has never been here before. I technically collected it the same day that I collected the Heritage RS and had my blue, nitrous blue Focus RS there at the dealership on the same day as well. But this thing is mega. The first upgrade that I actually did with it back at the time, while the engine was still being run in, before we did any performance mods, was the interior. Now in here, check this out, we went up to proto trim to completely redo it. We did these Alcantara seat covers for the Recaro sports seats, looking amazing. Also, in addition to that, the door card inserts, the top rolls over the top, and also the upper parts of the dashboard. This is super smart. I also added the SS tuning, carbon fiber steering wheel, and the gear shift knob as well for the interior, and a few other parts, including the illuminated RS side sills and some of the pocket inserts and other trim pieces that you see around. In fact, we even did the rear of the car to exactly the same specification, including, look at this, the Alcantara on the back of the front seats. And I tell you what, when I see this, it honestly makes me wish that I had done the same with the Heritage, although I'm not sure you can modify a 1 of 50 car in the same way. We then at Dub Customs did a lot of work on the exterior. We added the Ventus Veloce carbon fiber parts, so the full carbon fiber bonnet, which for the longest time was actually left exposed. We had carbon inserts for the front grille, the fog light surrounds, the front splitter, side skirts. What else did we do? The spoiler towards the back, the bumper, a few other things here and there. Now, it did have some flicks on the front side. They've actually been removed for a slightly cleaner look since. I also added the Anderson Composites side fenders. So these just add a little bit more width going onto the standard fitment, which we then at Topaz added Topaz skin on. So those could technically have the red peeled off the peelable paint spray and return back to full carbon if they ever wanted to come off the car. We added some BBS wheels. The BBS wheels absolutely mega on this. We went to install some Nashin cut brakes as well. You can see behind for some more stopping power to go with the extra oomph that this thing has. Plus, we added some door mirror caps also. Now, bonnet, engine. What has gone on with this? The badges have actually been changed. Now the red badges with the Mountune graphics. And if we come around towards the back, carbon side badge there. If we come around towards here, Mountune 500 horsepower. The owner of this actually has had quite a few different Focus RSs, including multiple RS 500s and other Mark IIs, including an Ultimate Green. Very jealous of that, but added a spare 500 badge because of the 500 horsepower, which makes sense. Other changes, new tail lamps. These are actually completely different to the standard ones. If I actually grab the key out of my pocket, just unlock this very quickly, you can see the different style inside there and the slightly smoked look as well, and a different exhaust system. This is the Mountune V3 system to tie in the whole Mountune system. I had a Varex X4 system on the car back at the time, so that's had a change since, plus some red badging up here as well. But let's go to the engine bay, because that was a big part of this car. Come and pop this open. Obviously feels very familiar after having driven a fair few miles with it back at the time. Just gonna remember where the latches are for this. Pop that open. Oh, that looks nice. We did the Mountune upgrades. In fact, some hefty engine upgrades. It was basically rebuilt, taking it up to about 500 horsepower. So new components, new internals, of course, new intake and cooler back here. Got the Mountain lettering over the front of it as well. Also even here, the addition of the red RS badge. But basically, turning this into something epic. And in fact, look at the underside of the bonnet here with the exposed carbon. And you can see how that was also skinned to paint it red. So this was full exposed carbon on the outside. Looked a little bit too boy racery, but very cool with the knacker duct and the hood vents that you have up there as well. And then added the carbon fiber parts inside here, including, we've got the new Pro Alloy tank there as well. We've got the Kuro carbon parts, just remembering everything that we actually added to this back at the time. Drop it down, always the nervy moment as you do that. But look at this thing. I think it's a wonderful example of, if I can say this myself, tasteful modification without going too far. I mean, we've also had new mud flaps added. It just looks really cool and aggressive. Really, really nice. And back here with the Ford Army, I mean, remember, I had that with the Heritage and the Ford GT together before the days of the Transit, the Mach-E, the GT500 and the Dark Horse, of course. But the Ford family very much growing here in the garage. So let me come through, take a seat in here for a moment. We have the lowering seat frame, so it's a different ride position to the Heritage. Yeah, notice that instantly, how you sit a touch lower. Of course, this is all fairly familiar. The more aggressive shifter, larger shift knob on that, and obviously a different steering wheel that we have. But start this up, good to see it. Had some driving, like I said, part of a collection with a number of different RS products. Oh, it sounds mean. It sounds just a touch beefier. All of these inserts, the carbon, as I mentioned, trims that we have around here. We pop it into sport mode. I mean, just running the without going too crazy before we've driven it. Oh, you hear more of the turbo whistles as well. I love this. Really happy with what I did with that. Very nice. So, I guess let me pull this on out. Let's go take it for a drive. If you're a regular viewer, you will not be surprised by this. If you're a new viewer, welcome. Please consider subscribing. But given we're in the United Kingdom, it's been raining, it's been wet today, it's been miserable. The story of the last, well, as much as I can remember right now. Anyway, driving in this car, a whole lot of things come flooding back. The sounds, the feeling, the general experience of it, sitting lower, holding this steering wheel. We've got a lot of upgrades. We did so much with Mountain. We started just with some small changes, air intake, that kind of thing, before we then went on to do the conrods, pistons, manifold, Borg-Warner turbo. We're running at the moment in the 380 horsepower map as opposed to the full 500. There's the M-Tune controller in the pocket just down here. I opened it up wondering if that was still in there, and yes, the new owner still has it all exactly as I did back at the time. But I tell you what, it's the Focus RS familiarity, but very different, and it's quite strange when you drive a different version of the same car. Like driving the AMG GTR into the GT Black Series, different engine, different feel, but very similar in so many ways. The same seat, I mean, this is the same seat, just positioned a little bit lower. I love the interior in here. It's really special, the whole setup. We've also got the Michelin Cup 2 tyres that we fitted on the car as well when we did the BBS wheels. And there's just that extra get up and go. And this, as we start to build into it, you'll get a little bit of a sense of what makes it so special. I mean, the Focus RS to me is a very special car in every guise, from the standard car onwards, because it's this manual four-wheel drive hot hatch, something that for these types of roads, driving here in the United Kingdom, we love because we have bumpy, rough tarmac. It's regularly through winter, exactly like this, a bit flooded, just not ideal, especially for a big supercar. Loads of cyclists out and about. Today just seems to be like cyclist crazy day, to be honest. I actually had a weird one earlier. I was driving 45 miles an hour on a straight 60 limit road and not accelerating, not even in sport, popping and banging in the Focus. And the guy was like waving to slow down. And I was like, slow down? Well, why would you slow down? You should speed up. You should be driving a little bit quicker. It's a national speed limit road. Anyway, trees have fallen. it is that time of year. Storms recently have been pretty bad, but as we start to just push this on a little bit, the brakes actually feel really good. Much more stopping power. I mean, we're just driving at general road speeds, right? So not really pushing it, but aware that we have those 6-piston front calipers, 4-piston rears. Everybody out for a wintertime walk. You get back on the power, and we're not even in sport mode yet as well, by the way. I need to dial that up in just a second. Flipping those shifts, it sounds mega. It's throatier than the regular car, of course louder as well. So if we go up into sport, press that button twice, okay, confirm. Oh yeah, that's got more throttle response. Oh, that's cool. Okay, I had forgotten that it would do that, the pops and bangs. That's silly. Okay, I know it's a different exhaust. It's funny, it's torque restricted at the bottom end in the lower gears. I missed that. I remember those kinds of noises. God. Okay, let's go peacefully through the village. Get back to the national speed limit, drop down the gear again, those cracks. And this is running in the lower tune, but you feel that bigger turbo. The way it delivers the power like that, it's just building and waiting to fully unleash. Now, being conscious of Cup 2s, and like I said, slightly greasy roads, I'm not gonna go too crazy, but this is mega. I remember basically having to run the engine in again after we did all the engine upgrades, taking it to the Nürburgring and having fun. I miss having a car like this. I miss having a car that is this kind of just silly, to be completely honest, just absolutely silly. I mean, this is a red edition. This is quite a rare car. The stock red cars with very few upgrades or no upgrades are still basically what they cost new. They haven't really ever changed from high 30,000s. This car has about that again in upgrades, about that again in the full host of different things that we did to it and that have been done to it since, that just make it this combination of both being an incredibly cool modified hot hatch, but also a rare limited edition. I mean, 300 cars is not a whole lot. And when you have roads like this, right, narrow, slightly wet, dirty, bumpy, this is where a car like this is absolutely in its element. The chap driving the Smart in front of me is definitely making some good progress as well. Fair play for throwing that down a lane like this as well. When you downshift, listen to that. You need to be in the countryside, you can't do that in a town. God, you'd make people run thinking something was going crazy, thinking there were literal gunshots. When it gets into the turbo band, this is just an entertaining riot. Now, there were more things I felt we could do. Suspension. We talked about a sequential at the time, you might remember. I talked extensively about fitting a Quaife sequential. They never fully got there, I believe, and there's a flood ahead, so I'm actually going to turn around here. Don't want to make a total mess of it. At the time, got that fully ready. There was a little bit more work that was going to be needed on it. But it wasn't far from being finished. And it's an interesting one for the videos, because I often said that, oddly, this was a car that I loved filming, and I know you guys loved the videos about. It was always, without fail, a kind of surefire success, whatever we were going to be doing and working on it. And I swapped from it to the GR Yaris. I thought the GR Yaris would be a really cool, interesting next project, and just mix it up a little bit for me as well. Like I said, a few other cars that were arriving at the same time. Basically, in that period, late 2020, when we were still figuring out what was going on in the world, I had the Taycan Turbo S, the AMG GTR Roadster, and the Toyota GR Yaris all inbound. So it was kind of, right, we need to clear up a little bit of space. The GTC4 Lusso went, this went, I can't think if anything else per se went at exactly that time, but basically preparing for what was going to be coming. And I just decided to let this go. And I wondered to this day whether I should have completed it, continued with the project, done more by way of modifications. But what I really love and really and truly love is that the current owner takes this to events. Some of you will have seen it at different events throughout the calendar. He drives it, he enjoys it, he gets it out there, and he continues the story of this particular red RS. This particular car that was so fun and had such a, I guess, build up over 2.5 years of working on it during some strange periods as well. You know, this lived in various different homes on the channel, but never obviously survived through to the days that we have now at the Shmuseum. So to be able to bring it back today, to be able to have had it, I mean, it is just ridiculous. It's just, it puts a smile on the face and you want to just go out and drive it. And like I say, if you dial it up even further, right? Gosh, if you dialed it even more than this, and I know that's not a whole lot more power than the standard car, it's just the way it delivers it through the turbo later in the rev range. That's that feeling of the boost building and then exploding that makes it quite a different experience to just driving a standard Focus RS or even the Heritage. It's not as quick a way in the lower RPMs off the line. It's when you get higher that it's like, whoa, okay. It's that frantic feeling almost in a way, but not a torque steery feeling. And obviously when I was able to push it harder in Germany, got a bit more of a feel for what that was actually like. But I want to just drive here on some dual carriageways just to be able to put down a little bit more power. This does not get boring. This just does not get boring. Just wait for it here. Point the steering wheel straight. We're four-wheel drive, but still, God. Wait for it to come in and then pulls away with a massive smile on the face. Let me close the windows. Just being back in here though, back feeling what this car was, what it is, you know, the fun of it. And I truly appreciate the opportunity to drive it today. I've taken a couple of former Shmeemobiles out for drives in the past, but this is definitely one that's so unique because it's not like you can just go and hop in another one and it will be the same. I mean, obviously Mountain have done a few of these other upgrades, but not with the full Ventus Veloce kit, the Proto Trim interior. There's no other car in the world like this one. This is unique. And as red editions go, it's also unique. It is by far the most modified limited edition red edition Focus RS. Like, no one else would, I think, be crazy enough to do that. And I suppose when I realized how the red was actually quite rare at the time, I did wonder why I was doing it. But then the Heritage being rarer still almost made that null and void, or at least that's what I'm telling myself about this, maybe, perhaps, I don't know. I think it goes without saying that we have to give it a bit of a tunnel test. Slow it down, start to drop down a few gears. That is just funny. Ridiculous, right? Oh, this is fun. Listen to that. Okay. The induction sound, the intake sound is cool. That's so, the cracks and bangs out of it. Like, they're a bit unpredictable. I don't entirely remember when it's going to do it and when it isn't. Sometimes it's just quiet when you expect it to make a really loud crackle and bang and pop and noise and stuff happen. But for the time being, back into chill mode. We'll take it easy. And just knowing that quick flick on the M-Tune, you're up to 500 horsepower. This thing becomes a weapon, an absolute weapon. We are back. Big smile on the face, because there's something really satisfying about doing a full project like this, doing a full car, making it into something that is that much fun to go out and drive, especially when, like I said, for a 1 of 300 car, it's super rare to begin with, and most people don't do that. Now, obviously, when it comes to other cars here at the garage, things like, for example, the SLS Black Series, and doing some modifications to that, even the GT Black Series, doing things like the Clio V6 project, has always been something I love. Like, just tinkering with it, not going too wild, not too far away from OEM, but an upgrade. Something I'd love to do more of with the 1M. That's obviously in the plans, in the pipeline to work on in the future. But I do think as well it would be fun to do another car like this, to build another project. I mean, this was 2 years in total, right, to go from the start to what it was. And it's obviously had a few more changes and things that have been updated on it since then to get it to the whole car that I've now been out to drive today. And it's really cool to have it back here, to have the two Focus RSs that lived together a couple of years ago back together. I mean, obviously this lived with the Ford GT. This was all in that build-up period, having got the allocation for the GT, then bought the Blue RS, then loved the Blue RS, so did the Red RS, and then the Heritage RS, and then the project with the Red, and all of that. It's quite funny thinking back and just piecing together the jigsaw that led towards this car now. A car which, like I said, the change of the turbo to the bigger single turbo is just bonkers when it gets higher in the rev range. The car obviously feels very familiar, but still a little bit strange because everything is different. All of your contact points, steering wheel, seat, shifter are all different. And then the way it drives and the throttle response is all completely different as well. And there are various different maps, so 380, 420, or go the full 500, depending obviously on the purpose, what it's for. And just a few, subtle things that have been changed with it since I owned this. So what an awesome thing to have to come and visit here at the Shmuseum. Not the first former Shmeemobile that's been back to visit. The Toyota GR Supra, the A90 edition, came back at one point. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if any of the others have as well, but I think great to be reminded of it because many of you will have seen the videos with this car at the time. So to have it back here and to have had another opportunity to get behind the wheel has been really cool. So I can't thank the owner enough for bringing it back down. It's been great to spend the day catching up, chatting about all things cars, Focus RS, Ford, and plenty more. But that's it for this time. Thanks as always to you guys. I appreciate your support an awful lot, and I will see you again very soon. Cheers.